This video is from Unit 2 Key Area 2.1, and what you're going to be looking at is sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, reproduction is the production of new members of a species, and for any species to survive, it's got to be able to produce enough young to replace any that are lost through old age or disease or other causes of death. You'll see a hyena here about to be eaten by this lion. So a species has got to be able to reproduce and produce young. There is sexual reproduction. Lots of organisms, including humans, reproduce sexually. That is with sex cells. It says here what are the names of the two types of sex cells produced by humans. Well, in the male, there's sperm cells. In the female, there's eggs. Or sometimes we call these ovum. Now, plants also carry out sexual reproduction, and the flower contains the sex organs of the plants. The male sex cells are produced here in the anthers, and the male sex cells are called pollen. Now, the female sex cells are found inside the ovary, and these are called ovules. Or sometimes we use this word here, ovum, but ovules will do, U-L-E-S. But plants and some other organisms reproduce by asexual reproduction. Now that's a type of reproduction where an organism makes an exact copy of itself. It doesn't involve any sex cells, there's only one type of parent. And this type of reproduction is more common in plants than it is in the animal. And the offspring they're clones of the parents because they're identical to the parents. So just to remind you the types of reproduction: sexual reproduction, type of reproduction that involves sex cells; asexual reproduction, a type of reproduction that doesn't involve sex cells. So we're going to have a wee look just at asexual reproduction in plants, making new copies of themselves. So the plants here can make copies of themselves without having any flowers, without having any sex cells, so no pollen, no ovules, and not making any seeds. We're going to have a look at some of the examples of them now. The first example here are runners, and plants such as this plant here, it's called a spider plant. You'll see that on this plant here, there's little runners growing out, and at the bottom of them, there's other little plants there. Now these plants, if they hit onto soil, they will just grow into new spider plants. So they're just long horizontal stems. Another example of the type of plant that does that are strawberry plants. If you've ever grown these in your garden or been to see them grow, then what happens is you get this runner shooting off, and here's the new plant. It's a copy of this plant here, and that can just get, if you're a gardener, you can just take that and peg it down into some soil and you get a new strawberry plant going, and you get new strawberries, which is very nice. So you get a new independent plant that is produced. Here's another example of a plant that reproduces asexually. It's called the Mexican hat plant, and it's just called that because the edges of the leaf, you get these little plantlets growing on them. You'll see that here. It looks a wee bit like a wee Mexican hat, so that's why they call it that. And these will actually drop off. And when they drop off, they'll drop off into the soil round about the plant, and they will grow roots and they'll grow into new plants. Here's another Mexican hat plant here, just so you see. Here's the little plantlets at the side here, and they will drop off. Here's another spider plant with lots of runners on it, and we new wee spider plants at the end of the runners. Now, some plants reproduce asexually using bulbs, and examples of those are daffodils, tulips, hyacinths and snowdrops. And onions also reproduce using bulbs. So when we're actually eating an onion, we're actually eating a bulb. And what happens is when these bulbs are underground, they'll divide underground and new plants will form. Other plants reproduce using other underground structures. So not bulbs here, we're talking about something here called tubers. And potatoes are examples of tubers. And what happens is you have your potato plant growing and the tubers swell out from the roots underground. And these are full of starch and we eat them. The plant isn't growing them for us to be able to eat them. The plant is growing them because each of these new tubers can then grow into a whole new plant. It's just that we pull the potatoes up before they get a chance to do that. But there will be new plants that would grow out of these tubers if we didn't do that. And all of these are just ways that plants naturally reproduce using asexual reproduction. I did say it was mostly plants that did that, but there are some animals that reproduce asexually, and an example of this is this little character here called an amoeba. It's a single-celled organism. It can be seen using a microscope, and you will have seen those when we had a look at some of the cells underneath microscopes. And they can move about by changing their body shape. And these amoeba can reproduce by asexual reproduction. Basically what happens is that the amoebas, they make copy of the genetic information contained within the cell. And so here's a wee copy nucleus. And then they can split into two. And when they split into two, you get two new cells. So you see on this slide here, here's two amoeba. They're just in the process of just splitting into two new amoeba cells. And here's a wee diagram here, some additional photographs of amoeba. So here's a wee single amoeba here. And here is the amoeba starting to make some division. And then as you go along the slide, you'll see the division starting to take place until eventually you end up with two new amoeba. So that's a form of asexual reproduction in animals. It doesn't happen in much more complicated animals. And we're going to have a wee look at sexual reproduction in the next video.